Hello, this video is for those people who may be considering playing Undiscovered with me. This here game. That's the back. There we are. And specifically with this supplement in high focus, which is my reason for playing, really, which are discovering dusters. So, where to start? First of all, this is a fantasy role-playing game that it just falls square into my definition for fantasy heartbreakers. And of those, it is remarkably bland. One of the most charming things about the fantasy heartbreakers is the raw color. Whether it is kind of cheesy, our dwarves are purple and have 4 arms, or whether it's brilliant, or whether it's just solid. We got elves, we got dwarves, we got halflings, and you look at them and you're like, wow, those are some pretty solid, meaty, sense of identity for these categories. Whatever it may be. But in terms of, why one might play, Undiscovered really doesn't offer very much. Its shining ideal of play has to do with the logical quality of improving in your skills and other things. If you look at, character at stage A, look at character at stage Z, you will get every last little step, and you made your decision about every last little step and change. And it is just exactly, nobody could criticize, the logic of this, which is fine, but I don't find it particularly inspiring as a desire to do, particularly because we're stuck with the very ancient logic of the character starts off this competent and really progresses into this competent, and that if you were to clip out any of that or isolate a piece of, why would you do that? You're missing the logic of the progression, and yet that progression doesn't really make a lot of fictional sense. Why should they be that skillless, in the beginning when they have all this identity going for them? Well, okay, you start playing teenagers. Oh, right, now we're back kind of in the early RuneQuest thing where the play necessarily begins as teen fic. That can be strong, but is it really what I want to do right now? And the answer is no. So why am I playing Undiscovered with all these criticisms and complaining? The answer goes back to the dusters. Of the many, as they're called, races of player character options, and you do have your dwarves and you do have your elves and things, and you got some wacky ones, which is fine. I'd find them a little bland even in their wackiness, except for the dusters. Who are they? They are plains or desert-dwelling humanoids who are small, not very strong, slender. They're not like stubby small, little teeny tiny small. They are just a little smaller than humans. They are they are described as bronze-skinned. They've got unusual, or at least unsettling, gold or yellow or kind of weird eyes. A little bit of a split tongue. Otherwise, they're not very snaky. They don't have tails. They're not scaly. The desert dusters, which is the only kind that I'm interested in dealing with here, are hairless. And what the core book tells us, which is their really cool shtick, is to shapeshift. A desert duster, can transform either into a sand snake, which is venomous, or can shapeshift into a drake, which is basically a little dragon, which is kind of awesome, actually. They're limited in doing these shifts to once a day, so kind of whatever you've shifted into today, well, that's what you've got. And there are a couple other things. They can see super well, like really long distances, really fine focus, and in the dark. So they've got these remarkable visual capabilities. They live in these tribes, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And and another ability of theirs is to burrow. So a duster, basically, as long as the ground is loose enough, The duster can head down there and stay pretty much indefinitely, and even travel, to a significant extent. So that's your dusters and their abilities. The cultural part is handled more in the supplement. In fact, a lot of interesting things jump up in that supplement, which basically made dusters the showpiece for my discussion of racism, specifically the half-breed trope. There's so much to talk about here. Let's go to the cultural stuff first. The stuff for dusters is all based on popular conceptions of Native Americans, and is as fine an example of appropriation as you might find. The question that I have is, well, how bad is that? Now we can say, well, it's just bad straight out. We just shouldn't be having any cultural appropriation. But I found myself thinking hard about this. I've been thinking hard about it for a while. And I guess I finally articulated it for myself with this perhaps odd phrase, which is okay, well, first of all, this thematic punch of half-breed drama. Clearly, we're going to have humans around, and we're going to have desert dusters, and then the rules that I'll talk about in a minute regarding the interbreeding between the two, which is unique to the game in terms of all the categories. There's no other crossbreeding among the types. This is it, the only one. And here we go. Yes, it's like what the thematic punch of half-breed drama, plus the challenge of using existing historical genre tropes in fantasy. Can it be good? And can doing it well be a good thing to do? Right? Is it possible to overcome the base fact of appropriation with what you do with it? That's a hell of a challenge. And I find it intriguing in and of itself at a theoretical level. And I don't think it could be addressed except at a deeply non-theoretical level, from an intuitive, performative, interactive level among us. And to see what can be done with that. Is this something that other people want to do with me? That's kind of an important point. You're going to have to, wince a little here and there when we talk about, totems and stuff like that, or other, or many aspects of the desert dusters, habits of life. Well, part of it helps that the fact that they aren't human may actually permit us to work with this positively in some ways. Boy, there's a whole hornet's nest of a discussion that raises, though. Oh, but are we otherizing by making them, non-human? Right, exactly. Let's play. Let's see who we are in terms of these issues by doing it. Let's talk a little bit about them as sort of as their own group. And my apologies, but I'm going to talk about naughty parts. Some of this is instigated by the book. In terms of human duster interbreeding, the book states that a female duster can copulate with a male human, but not the reverse. And it specifically refers to the anatomy of the male duster simply not being suited to that. And so, being the biologist that I am, I've come to the conclusion of the following. So this is what I've made up. First of all, that in humanoid form, that dusters' genitals are identical between male and female, and extremely minimal. Nothing but a labial slit. And insofar as comparison is involved, less obvious or distinctive than a human's. So really, I mean, they almost look like, sexless dolls in terms of their external genital anatomy. Um, the males are bigger. That's by the rules. And I think that we can sort of consider some sexual dimorphism, um, clearly less than humans have. So that stated, I'm also suggesting that dusters mate in snake form, and that follows all the biology of real snakes, and you can go ahead and check that out if you want to. So that would sort of clarify a bit that if a female duster mates in humanoid form, it's going to be with a human. And there's a few other interesting points that I could bring up. I could talk about a piece of the anatomy called the urogenital sinus and stuff like that. Suffice to say that no, the male does not have a vaginal canal. But anyway, that all stated. So what then does that lead to for the half dusters? And first of all, recognize that in this game, a half duster, by definition, has a duster parent and a human parent. So we're not talking about a generalized population that we call, the half breeds. These are instances. If you're a half duster, you've got a parent of each type done. That's taken care of. So the book states that they are effectively duster in their anatomy and biology. They can't turn into a drake. They can turn into a sand snake. Their observational skills are a little worse. They're a little tougher than most dusters, just a little bit bigger, but they live typically with dusters and are considered part of their community. Apparently, dusters don't, really flip at the notion of, a half human among them. So there's some talk about how some of them live, with people, and then there's slight differences in the rules about that. So that can happen too. Now, one can ask a couple of points. How does this happen? Well, what I'm envisioning is to jettison the whole setting of the game. I don't care about their fantasy setting. I don't care about any of their other types. No elves, no dwarves, gone, poof. We are narrowing into a fantasy that I have in mind, which is best described as desert and plains sprawl, with there being, civilized human communities all scattered around the world or whatever. But we are looking at basically rural, perhaps you could say frontier, if that term applies. I'm not sure it does, but certainly far-flung humans. I'm thinking of a river valley, but aside from the river and associated agricultural points along it, we're talking what humans would think of as wastelands. Dusters, of course, live there perfectly happily, but anyway, I'm envisioning a lot of things. I'm envisioning that since the book specifies between barbaric humans and civilized humans, I'm thinking that ages ago, there were barbaric humans and dusters here, and they didn't get along. That over the centuries, humans from the so-called civilized areas, moved in, and there was ethnic cleansing. The barbaric humans are pretty much gone. And for whatever reason, the dusters have a much more easy relationship with the civilized humans. Clearly, the use of the land is very, very different. And the kind of land that the civilized humans want to use and the purposes to which they put the river have nothing to do with duster life. So there's no sort of crisis over the usage of things as there would have been with the previous humans. I should also point out that dusters live a super long time. 300 years is a duster life. So we could actually have some old dusters who remember, before the new people came. And then the half-dusters also are long-lived, but not that long-lived. So clearly half-dusters are an individual instance phenomenon. And so if you want to play a desert duster, you can. I'm thinking that some of them live in ways that bring them into contact with the humans relatively often, and so therefore that's where the half dusters are going to crop up once in a while. But that a lot of dusters live way out there, and they only peripherally deal with humans, probably hardly ever directly. So think of those as, way out there in places where humans just would never go, because you die if you go out there. So then what about one more category, which has to do with the fact that half dusters can themselves have children. And I'm thinking that the rules are the same, that a female half duster can mate with a human or with a duster or other half duster, obviously, but that the males cannot. And that they are, aside from very slight differences in size and ability and the significant inability to turn into a drake, that there's really not much difference between a half duster and a duster. However, given that there are some half dusters around, given that they may have themselves mated with humans, and then those humans, or the result of those matings, are what? Well, in the book, they're called dravers, and it doesn't really matter how direct the lineage is. Dravers are a population effect. So dravers are different from half dusters. They don't have to have a specific parentage. They just have to have some ancestry somehow of duster. They're illustrated as hairless as well, although that's not mentioned. But we can go ahead and say that they either have no hair or are, minimally hairy for humans, because they look like humans mainly. They have some facial similarity to dusters. I'm going to say that their genitalia are human. They are effectively a human variant. They cannot shapeshift. They can burrow a little bit. Their eyesight is a little better than a human's. But they are physically much closer to human than to duster in terms of their strength and stuff like that. And they also are remarkably skilled with cool glass weaponry. And I really like the idea of these sand derived, glass blades, because you don't need iron, you don't need any metallurgy, and you've got a hell of a lot of sand. So, that can be an interesting thing involved here. And one of the reasons possibly why dravers do fine in the human communities of the area, because, the glass weapon making could be a big thing. So anyway, that's my circumstance for all this and my thoughts on some of it. What about other aspects of play? Are we going to start with first level characters and grunt our way up, experience point by experience point, through their carefully crafted, lineage of skill development? My answer is no. I think we'll probably start at 5th or 6th level, and maybe not even attend to change. Maybe, do a little change, like one step to the equivalent of 7th level, just in order to enjoy some improvement, in skills that we've used and stuff like that, but not make it a big deal. So I'm basically breaking with the game, if you want to look at it that way. And I'm going strictly for themes, strictly for story drama, strictly for the issues that I've raised. Another rules detail concerns the options. So as I see it, we're basically not working with any of the magic in the book except for what's emphasized heavily in the Duster supplement. So instead of all those magical skills and the covens, we're not using those at all. The only things in the book that we're going to use are the miracles, and for those, only the totem miracles. So that's a really minimal amount of the magical rules in the book. What about from the supplement, though? There you have the shamanic skills and the shamanic magic. And so effectively any character can use the totem miracles just because they honor their ancestors. And then the shamans can use that specific magic that's there. We may or may not amend that a bit. There is a Duster god who is worshipped in a more traditional way. The book is super clear that if you do that, you cannot be a shaman at all. I mean, it's either or. So who knows? Maybe some of the dusters, half dusters, and dravers may be inclined, if they're religious, may be inclined to focus a bit on worshiping that god, and that kind of worship would be considered sort of a human type of worship. So as opposed to, the tribal, the people living off in the tribes and stuff, they're just not going to do that at all. So those are my thoughts on the magic. So, okay, there you go. If you haven't been scared off by, genitals talk and stuff like that, let me know if you're interested.